I play Tetris for 5 minutes and I still see falling blocks in my dreams. Yes, folks, the Tetris effect, it's real, it's addictive, it's entertaining, it's absorbing. Tetra and tennis, human centipede together to present one of the most addictive and highest selling video games of all time. All this and more is talked about in Tetris, an Apple TV exclusive from director John S. Bayard, or Bard, not actually sure how to pronounce his last name, I apologize. He's done television and movies such as Stan and Ollie, and was also written by Noah Pink, not to be confused with taking the fictitious biblical figure Noah with his Ark of the Covenant, or just maybe his Ark with 2 of every animal. Boy, that's certainly something to talk about in a different review. And he also was not being fused with the pop artist Pink. It's great. Has a lot of great music, a lot of addictive music. Speaking of addictive, Tetris. Falling blocks, busting lines, and continuing to be played in some form or another to this very day. And it was created in the late 1980s by a man named Alexei, who just created on his computer. And this is a story about how many people were trying to get the rights and bluffing their way through deals and everything. It has Taron Egerton, who plays Hank Rogers, not Hank Rogers, Hank with an E. Basically mortgages his goddamn future and his family's future to get the rights to Tetris after seeing the game played at a game con thing, something or other. And of course, this was back in the 80s when a lot of stuff was played, on the 8-bit stuff or computers or whatever. And a lot of nostalgia can be found while watching this. If you're like me, and I know I am, and I love being like me, because if I wasn't like me, who the fuck else would I be? Hey, I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. You're going to remember Tetris. Whether it was on Nintendo later, Super Nintendo being paired with Dr. Mario, or, of course, the way that it was pretty much presented to the goddamn masses on the Game Boy. And I remember having a Game Boy. I also remember before that, a neighbor friend having a Game Boy, and man, pairing that and playing Tetris and everything was just so goddamn fun. There's a lot of goddamn fun to be had with Tetris. And I do, even though I have not played it for years, I still see falling blocks in my sleep. I can look at the tile on, floors, on walls, just in any building, and be like, I can't really do the music, but yeah, you get some nostalgia in this. You also get a movie that is well acted and entertaining for the most part, though I don't know if it's one of the best films of the year. Obviously, it takes the real-life story of how the Tetris deal came together, considering it was designed by a guy in Soviet Russia. In Soviet Russia, Tetris play you. Boy, that is really getting old. How about here's to you, Mrs. Fleckenstein? It's a terrible Peter Griffin impression. I'm sorry. But yes, the man, Alexei, is being besieged by so many people in communist Russia with an attempt from Mirosov and Taron Egerton's bulletproof software to basically get the rights to Tetris. The story, such as it is, there are good parts, and while it's a fascinating story, I hate to say it, I think this movie's a little overly long. I think it could have been 100 minutes and it would have been fine. There are a few parts where I'm like, we could have cut this out. Few things just feel a little bit stretched, but of course, based on a true story of how Tetris came to be. I did like the 8-bit intros and occasionally the wipes to the buildings that had Tetris blocks and stuff like that. That was pretty good. There were some good ingenuity put into this. I mean, even with a story that ended up kind of dissolving into the typical negotiations and screwing over and bluffing with money people may or may not have. There's the Maxwells, and if you read up on the story of Tetris, it's actually a lot more fascinating than the movie presents. While they do present some good things, it's better to read up on the whole thing. Seriously, it's fucking ridiculous and insane how this game came to be. But, yes, playing Tetris for 5 minutes, I mean, really, that's all you need to still see falling blocks. Like, I'm not going to say Tetris is the best game ever invented, but it's one of the most simple yet addictive video games ever. Years upon years after playing it, and I can still see all that shit. Hank tells the story to a banker, basically. Hey, we need to, here's this story, and here's how this happened, and I need money. I need money. I talked to Nintendo, and Nintendo wants me to get the rights. And I refuse their $500,000 offer because I want to help them and I want to make more money. $3 million from the bank, basically, a bank that he already owes money to. Can't figure out why there was a weird collapse in the 80s with the credit card crunch and all that. Can't figure it out. But that's another story for another day. He meets with Nintendo of America, sees a Game Boy, and from there we go on. And then we see various negotiations and stuff like that. We get the Maxwells. They're British fellows that may or may not have a bunch of money that they claim to have. I mean, people bluffing with money and borrowing money, or borrowing money from poor people or taking money from programs meant to help poor people and putting it into your own slush funds. No business would ever do that. In all seriousness, the movie actually is pretty entertaining and does reach a conclusion that ultimately, I guess, gives it a happy ending because, yes, the video game being presented to the masses was a happy ending after all. And from there, I'll talk about spoilers in a little bit. I do want to apologize, however, before I get to that, for not getting to this movie when it first came out. Part of the reason is my time is limited, and I just got around to it now. And also, Apple TV has some good stuff. Their interface sucks, and also outside of a few new exclusives. I'm not into their series that much, so I don't really watch a bunch. I watch Causeway and a few others on there, and that's about it. I will watch a movie that they're bringing out with Chris Evans and Ana de Armas called Ghosted pretty soon, so look for that review. But if you like Tetris, who doesn't like Tetris? I imagine a lot of people do. You'll probably enjoy this movie. Is it the best of the year? No. Is it terrible? No. I would say actually it's pretty good overall, with some good acting. Taron Egerton is doing his best to get out of the Kingsman thing. He's been in some other good movies. And this is a pretty good role for him. Even with the cliches and with the stuff like that, it still works overall. So I am going to get into spoilers just so you know. So 3, 2, 1, spoilers. Okay, so he meets a woman named Sasha when he goes to communist Russia to negotiate this deal, and it turns out that Sasha actually is a KGB agent because everybody has to lead double lives, double, triple crosses, all that. The Maxwells continue to bluff their way into this deal, thinking they had layers of intent, and they had all this stuff, and they're negotiating, they're offering money up front, but it's not as much as, Hank is able to get Nintendo to offer, because Nintendo, growing as a company, I mean, the Nintendo Entertainment System, good God, Mario and all that stuff, and launching a Game Boy, they were investing a whole lot of stuff in this. I will say that the Super Scope 6 for Super Nintendo and the pad thing you run on wasn't exactly all that great, and they had that robot that, had the games, or whatever the hell it was. I forgot the name of it. Help me in the comments, I've gone blank. But Nintendo's had their misses, but they had their hits, and also Toby Jones is in this, who is the same height sitting down or standing up. Toby Jones is a terrific actor that also must have grown up in the Shire. Actually, he never grew up. I'm going to stop making short jokes eventually. Mara Huff plays Tracy, who I believe she's only in a few scenes, she's not there very long. And Miles Barrow, and then Rick Yoon, and various others, and some actors from Russia that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the names of. The guy who plays Alexei actually is pretty good. I like to see him in more stuff. And it's funny seeing the Game Boy designed, and they couldn't do color, because that'd be 8 batteries, that'd be too expensive. But the 4 batteries, and the way they designed it, allowed for 30 hours of playtime, and all for $89. And it's funny because if you look at other handhelds like the Game Gear, the Sega Game Gear, while colorful and everything, 8 batteries like crazy. The Atari Lynx, same thing. I don't know if the Atari Lynx ate the same amount of batteries, but Atari also, by this point, had the Lynx, they had the Jaguar a little bit later in the 90s. I mean, a lot of video game stuff I could talk about, but to Russia, Sasha plays a translator, and then we find out she's a KGB agent. There's a few other really evil guys. They're like generic evil guys. There's a Belikov, who ends up, kind of being the guy that helps Hank get his deal. The Maxwells, also, the senior Maxwell, Robert, he is friends with Mikhail Gorbachev. The guy with the freaking birthmark on his goddamn head. And Hank ends up trying to befriend Alexei because he recognizes giving him, giving him his just due. He wants to help him. He obviously can't, give him everything right away. But if you know anything, Hank and Alexei end up actually forming the Tetris company and doing some great things. And Nintendo, of course, had a roaring success with the goddamn Game Boy. The movie really doesn't end up having anything outside the typical negotiations, this kind of stuff. People get beat up. There's a party where there's the final countdown. At one point, Hank thinks that he lost everything because the Maxwells were able to make this offer. And Soviet Russia was making deal not with you. Boy, I'm surely getting old. Oh, wait, I already said that. And then Alexei basically risks his goddamn future by causing a fire, because he didn't start the fire. Actually, he did, and the basket was burning. He didn't start the fire, but he did it actually to send a fax where Hank, thinking he lost everything, and they're fucked, gets this, has to make this offer, talks to Nintendo executives, Nintendo of America, that is, and they go make the deal. And then Alexei has lost his apartment, his job, or he's being moved from his apartment. His children, his wife are being threatened. And then the Maxwells are like, we need to make a deal. Well, that doesn't end up working because the Maxwells have no money. They basically mortgage their goddamn future. They're pretty much fucked. They're totally goddamn fucked. They're bluffing. The company is totally broken. The contract that they offer is totally broken. Belikov, even though he gets beat up at one point, knows that Hank can actually benefit Russia. The country is broken, says Mikhail Gorbachev, or the guy playing Mikhail Gorbachev, since I believe that guy's been dead since. It would have been hilarious to get him in the movie. And then they manage to get the deal. They escape to the airport. It looks like they're going to get caught almost Argo style, except actually, I remember with Argo, they got on the plane, and you're just wanting the plane to take off, mainly because of tension, but also you just want Argo to be over because it got a little bit dicey. These Russian guys got on the plane, and oh no, they're on the wrong plane, and they're flying away, the executives and Hank with their deal. And then from there, the evil guys are arrested by Sasha and the KGB agent. Can you point a gun at me like that? I have issues. A lot. She was pretty. She really was. The actress playing Sasha was really pretty. So anyway, then we find out that the Game Boy selling like hotcakes. Him and Hank and Alexei form the Game Boy company. He passes it off to his daughter at one point, or Hank passes it off to his daughter. And they roar in success. Maxwell's go bankrupt and all that. And it's all a big happy ending and all that. And then communist Russia falls. And Russia's just been totally fine since then. Oh. Sorry to anybody in Russia if you happen to be watching this. I hope you're doing well. Sorry you have to deal with Putin. But nevertheless, the movie was entertaining enough. It misses the A mark. And again, being a little bit long in the tooth for the story, even though the story is good. I think there were a few scenes that got repeated, seemingly. But for what it is, B+. Get to B+. Let me know your thoughts on Tetris in the comments, please. And did you like the movie? Do you like the game? What was the first version of Tetris that you guys played? Anyway, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Reckland. I'll see you soon.